All around, Europe is falling into war, while here, suddenly, there's this strange silence, tense like a stretched wire. The army is mobilized, men march off, trains roll, and at the borders, barriers of concrete and steel grow, because nobody really knows where the attack might come from. Then France falls, and suddenly Switzerland is like an island in the middle of enemy territory, surrounded by powers that have swallowed whole countries in weeks. What do you do when you are small, but you can't appear small? You show your teeth, but you don't put all your eggs in one basket. While many think of the flat center of the country, a tougher calculation begins in the background. If the enemy breaks through the central plateau quickly, the army would be surrounded in a short time, and that's exactly what they want to avoid. That's why the focus shifts towards the Alps, to where valleys get narrow, roads bunch up, and every meter becomes expensive. As early as the summer of 1940, thousands of prepared demolition charges were placed for important roads and bridges inside Switzerland, so that in an emergency, they wouldn't have to improvise, but could make entire routes unusable within minutes. This creates a picture that seems quiet on the outside, but is razor-sharp on the inside. Stay calm, gather your strength, and in the worst case, drive up the price of an attack so high that it's not worth it. In the end, it was exactly this mix of nerves, terrain, and preparation that makes Chapter 1 of this story so exciting. After the shock of 1940, there wasn't loud shouting in Switzerland, but a quiet shift. The idea is as simple as it is brutal. If someone comes, they won't comfortably chew their way through the central plateau, but will break their teeth on the mountains. That's why plans, troops, and material move towards the Alps, while in the valleys, every bridge, every curve, and every choke point suddenly looks like a chessboard. They don't want to be strong everywhere, but where an enemy has no choice but to get stuck. And that's where the deterrence lies, not in a big bang, but in the prospect of a long, expensive fight, meter by meter, stone by stone. For an emergency, so-called demolition objects were prepared in such a way that pioneers often only had to insert detonators and charges when an alarm sounded, because niches, cable routes, and fastenings were already installed in many places beforehand. While life goes on outside, a network of command, mountain, and concrete grows beneath the surface, and it sends a clear message. You might be able to invade, but it won't be easy. After all, the Reduit is less a place than a promise, namely that in an emergency, Switzerland will retreat to where the map itself becomes a weapon. In the Alps, defense suddenly becomes architecture because every wall, every curve, and every rock gets a job. While the roads in the valley seem like harmless lines, the choke points turn into bottlenecks, and that's exactly where the key positions are. Well camouflaged, well supplied, and with a view of everything that would have to move. St. Maurice, Sargans, the Gotthard, that sounds like geography, but it's actually a system of fortress areas, barriers, and firing fields that forces the enemy to slow down. In addition, there are anti-tank barriers, demolition sites, and paths that are changed in an emergency so that a passage becomes a trap. And now, the point many people don't know. Some fortifications were built in such a way that they had their own power supply, water reserves, and ventilation inside, so that crews could hold out for weeks even if access was cut off. This creates this special logic of the Reduit. Not fighting everywhere, but digging in where the enemy cannot avoid it. And while snow falls or the summer sun burns outside, behind seemingly harmless rock faces lies a second Switzerland, quiet, prepared, and ready to measure the price of an attack in time. While war raged outside, a quiet, tough phase of holding on began inside. Troops were moved, reorganized, moved again because they learned as they prepared. The Reduit was not a static plan on paper, but a living system that was constantly adapted depending on how the war developed. Soldiers lived for months in tunnels and fortresses, practiced procedures, checked materials, and learned to cope with little space, little light, and a lot of responsibility. At the same time, civilian life continued outside, while inside, every shift, every watch, and every exercise was geared towards functioning immediately in an emergency. Some units in the Reduit were organized to act independently, even if radio contact was interrupted, with clear orders and decision-making freedom at a lower level. This created a special form of defense, not waiting for orders, but being prepared. That's why the Réduit was less a fortress of concrete than an attitude of endurance, discipline, and trust in people who could act independently at the decisive moment. That's exactly what made this phase so crucial, quiet, tense, and full of inner movement.